Hello again. I want to get you started in this first kind of lecture. This is really kind of an introduction to the outline of the grand narrative of the Bible, and it's how the whole book of it's how of Goheen and Bartholomew is organized. So let's take a quick look at the book. If you have your books, you can open it up to the table of contents. It's on page Roman numeral 7 and should look like this. And you can see they've even used this outline. If you looked at the outline from the introduction in the previous topic, we talked about page 5. That is where we have kind of a clear outline, but you can see they have outlined the book, and really the chapters of the book are the outlines of the drama. So you see Acts 1, 2, and 3 with scenes 1 and 2. Then there's an interlude, and then we have Acts 4, 5, again, 2 scenes here, and then Act 6. And we're going to be working through all of that material and learning more about it. So the table of contents is another way that they're using the grand story of the Bible. I do want you to read the preface to the book. I've assigned it. Both the preface and the prologue are important parts that you need to know. When you read in the preface, you find the author's main intentions for this book. They number them almost like a 3-point sermon. They want us to know the story of the Bible. And they're going to really stress the comprehensive stroke, comprehensive scope, and restorative nature I was just making sure I was still recording. The comprehensive scope and the restorative nature of God's redemptive work. We can break that down into some subpoints. Comprehensive scope. In other words, we're going to look at the forest rather than the trees. So we're going to look at the big sweep of the history of the story that's told in the Old Testament. We're not going to get bogged down in small little stories, one after another, in any one of the books. In a few places, we'll emphasize some things in the life of Abraham, a little bit in Joseph, and then obviously when we get the New Testament, we'll focus on Jesus quite a bit, and the history of the early church, especially in the missionary works of the Apostles Paul. And the last aspect of that is the restorative nature. In other words, the Bible is the story of how God has been, is, and is going to restore his creation to its original intention, its original peace or perfection, if you will. And then that also is describing kind of theologically how God's work is redemptive. God's not a celestial judge who's waiting to put the hammer down upon us, but he is working to redeem the world and to bring the world back in line with the way he intended it to be. They also want us to realize that God's redemptive work is ongoing, and we need to find our place in it. The story has not ended. These stories set a pattern and a model for us to realize what is really going on in our own lives. The Bible narrates God's mission and the Bible narrates God's mission to restore creation. You see my note here to read the quote from the bottom of page Roman numeral 10. Let's see if we can get this to come around for us. Here we go. Here's the quote I'm talking about. The Old Testament narrates the history of Israel's. Let's try to change it a little bit. The Old Testament narrates the history of Israel's response to their divine calling. Israel fails, and the Father sends Jesus, who takes upon himself the missionary vocation that had been given to Israel. Jesus embodies God's purpose for humanity and accomplishes victory over sin at the cross, inaugurating the new creation in his resurrection. He also sends his church with the mandate to continue that same mission. And so mission defines the life of God's people today, in our own time, standing as we do between Pentecost and the return of Jesus. We, as the people of God, are to witness in life, deed, and word to the rule of Jesus Christ over all life. And so that really is that's kind of a summary of the whole Bible there on the bottom of page Roman numeral 10 through Roman numeral 11. In the prologue on page 1, the next section, the authors explain the importance of knowing the biblical story, and I hope you'll read that and give your attention to it as well. Story gives us a context to understand reality, a lens through which to make sense, to know. You know, everybody has a worldview, not just Christians, but everybody has a worldview, a way that we define what's right with the world, who we are, how we find our identity, what's wrong with the world, how do we fix the world. All of us have a worldview. A worldview is like corrective lenses that gives us clear vision. And we believe, as Christians, that the Bible is the only worldview that's correct, the only one that really works. But we also know that people view things differently, and we can respect those differences, but at the same time, we want to clearly call out and let people know that there's hope and there's redemption from the problems of humanity that we can find in Christ and in the story of the text. And so we can think about anything in this world through the lens of the biblical text and begin to get a clear vision of who we are and what we're about. So this is kind of where we're headed over the course of the semester, and where we are going. Christians believe that there's one true story, which does not just tell the personal history of Israel, but it tells the true story of the whole world. Some of you have grown up in church or around church and have heard many of the stories of the Bible. One of the things that we often find among these students is that they do not know how they all go together. They know the trees, but not the forest, if you will. Others have only heard a few stories and maybe none of them. In my own life, I never really went to church until I was about 17 years old. I'd gone some with my family when I was younger, but my family didn't go at all. And I knew a few stories, but I didn't really have any idea till I began to study the Bible for myself how the stories all went together. No matter what your background is, we're going to focus on that big picture story in order to stress those themes of God's redemptive work. We're going to talk about the grand narrative of the Bible by outlining it as a drama, just like we've seen on page 5. Now, you can ignore this on the final exam. That's for another class. All along the way, we're going to work on how to use this Bible to understand our world, and that's always going to be our focus. And we always want to work on trying to apply this story to our lives. So lecture 1 done. Peace be with you.